Before we begin, make yourself comfortable, maybe grab a drink, dim the lights, and settle in. If you enjoy stories that stay with you after a long day, feel free to like this video and subscribe. And as the story unfolds, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Now, let me tell you a story.
You shouldn't have done that.
Misty Berrycloth did everything to get Levy Bianchi to notice her. She'd already tried short outfits, shameless flirting, casual accidents. Nothing worked. He kept treating her like an annoying little sister, so she decided to make one final attempt. At a party, Samuel Grant, the guy who was interested in her, and she decided to give him a chance. She just didn't imagine Samuel would kiss her, hold her, smell her hair, caress her, and that she'd like it, and all of it right in front of Levy. The result? He went crazy with jealousy because now he was no longer her main focus, and he did something that shocked everyone. And I'm Lena, the creator of this channel. Now on screen, I'm showing you the comments from Connie and Teresa. Thank you so much for the compliments, everyone. But before we continue, answer me something. Can a relationship work out after one of the parties flirts with someone else? Tell me down below, and maybe your comment will appear in the next video. Chapter 1. Provocation and the Phrase That Destroys.
It's really over now.
Provocation and the phrase that destroys the party at Oliver's house was in full swing when I decided I needed water. The kitchen was empty, silent, a perfect refuge from the heat and loud music vibrating through the living room walls. I didn't expect him to follow me, but the sound of heavy footsteps behind me made my heart race before I even turned around. Levi Bianchi was standing in the kitchen doorway, his dark eyes fixed on me in a way that made me feel like the air had gotten thicker, harder to breathe. He closed the door behind him with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot in my head, and then walked toward me with that quiet confidence that always left me unsteady. Before I could process what was happening, he was too close, trapping me against the cold marble counter, his hands resting on either side of my body, pinning me without even touching me. "You need to stop." His voice came out hoarse, loaded with something I couldn't fully name, but that made my skin break out in goosebumps. I tried to seem more confident than I felt. "Stop what?" Looking at me like that. His eyes traveled down my face, my neck, the dress I had chosen so carefully, knowing he would be there, wearing these dresses, making me. His hand rose, his fingers touching my face with a delicacy that contrasted completely with the tension in his body. "Want things I can't have." My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. "What if I want you to want them?" For a second, just one eternal and perfect second, he was completely still, his eyes on my lips, his breath so close I could feel the heat. He leaned in, closing the distance between us, and I closed my eyes, waiting, wanting, needing this for so long that my entire body was trembling with anticipation. "Hey, Levy, I need—" Oliver's voice cut through the moment like a sharp blade. Levi pulled away from me so fast I almost lost my balance. When I opened my eyes, he was already on the other side of the kitchen, his face completely closed off, as if nothing had happened. Oliver was standing in the doorway, his eyes going from me to Levi with an expression I couldn't fully read, but that had a touch of suspicion. "Everything okay here?" My brother's question seemed casual, but I knew him too well not to notice the tension underneath. "Yeah, fine." Levi ran his hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. Misty just needed water, and then he simply left, leaving me there, frustrated and confused, with the bitter taste of disappointment burning in my throat. Again, always again. Then other memories came back. The terrace was quiet, far from the noisy party happening downstairs. I had come here to breathe, to escape the people and the music, but ended up finding exactly the person I was trying to get away from. Levi was leaning against the railing, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes lost in the dark horizon of the city. He was different, more relaxed than normal, and when he saw me, he didn't try to hide the way his eyes traveled over my entire body before returning to my face. "You know what's hard, Misty?" He took another sip, his voice coming out looser than I'd ever heard before. The alcohol had torn down the barriers he normally kept so firm. "I like you. A lot. More than I should." My heart jumped in my chest, hope igniting like a sudden flame. "Then why don't we—" "Because your brother is my best friend." He shook his head, as if fighting with himself. "Because you're too young. Because my world is dangerous, and you deserve light, not darkness." Frustration burned inside me. "I'm not a child, Levi. I'm 21. I can choose, but I can't." The pain in his voice was real, palpable. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to scream. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything." And then, like always, He turned and left, leaving me alone with his words echoing in my head. I stood there, alone on the cold terrace, feeling the frustration grow until it transformed into something bigger, something more dangerous. How many more times would this happen? How many more times would he tell me he wanted me and then just run away? Present Pietra was sitting on my bed, watching me with that expression she always used when she was about to tell me something I didn't want to hear. She crossed her arms and sighed, shaking her head slowly. Enough, girl. 8 years of this? He doesn't want you. Accept it. He said he likes me. My voice came out more defensive than I intended. Several times. And he never did anything. Pietra stood up, walking toward me with her hands on her hips. Words mean nothing without action, Misty. Nothing. I knew she was right. Deep down, I always knew, but admitting it out loud seemed impossible, like giving up a part of myself that had been alive for so long that I didn't know who I'd be without it anymore. That's why today is the final test. Oliver's party. Samuel is coming with me. If Levy doesn't react, I took a deep breath, trying to believe my own words. I accept that it's over. Pietra looked at me skeptically. Seriously this time? Yes, I promise. But even as I said it, a part of me still hoped, still believed that maybe, just maybe this time would be different. The dark green dress fell perfectly on my body, elegant and daring at the same time. Samuel was by my side when we entered Oliver's house, his hand gentle on my back, guiding me through the crowd of people. I wasn't looking for Levy, but my body found him anyway, as if there were an invisible magnet pulling me in his direction. He was near the bar, talking to someone, but when his eyes met mine, I saw the way his entire body tensed, how his jaw locked, how the drink in his hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Oliver appeared at our side, hugging me before greeting Samuel. Then he approached Levy, and even from a distance, I could see the silent conversation they were having through looks and subtle expressions. She brought Samuel. Oliver's voice was low, but I managed to hear. I see. Levy's response was dry, too controlled. Doesn't it bother you? Why would it? She's your sister, my friend. She can go out with whoever she wants. I felt a pang of something bitter in my chest. My friend. Was that how he saw me? After everything? The music was soft, perfect for dancing, and Samuel pulled me to the center of the room with a kind smile. He wasn't invasive, wasn't possessive. He was just present. His hands were respectful on my waist, guiding me through the rhythm, and when he leaned in to whisper something funny in my ear, I laughed for real. It wasn't forced, wasn't fake. Samuel was good. He was easy. He made me feel light in a way Levy never had. But I could still feel the weight of Levy's gaze on me, burning across the room, even without looking directly at him. It was as if my entire body was tuned into his presence, into the tension radiating from him in almost visible waves. Oliver was beside Levy now, saying something I couldn't hear, but from my brother's expression, he was confronting Levy about something. Are you going to stand there watching or do something? Oliver's voice was provocative, but there was a seriousness underneath it. Do what? She's with him, happy apparently, and it bothers you. No, liar, but fine. Keep pretending. I pretended I wasn't paying attention, that I was completely focused on Samuel, but every word exchanged between them entered my ears like small needles, reminding me of everything I was trying to forget. The party had slowed down, and I had gone out looking for Oliver, needing a moment away from Samuel, away from Levy, away from everything. That's when I heard the voices coming from my brother's office, the door ajar letting pieces of conversation escape. I should have kept walking, should have respected their privacy, but when I heard my name, my feet stopped on their own. So, Misty and Samuel. Official, apparently. Oliver's voice sounded casual, but I knew my brother too well not to notice the provocation underneath. Good for her. Levy's response came accompanied by the sound of a glass being placed on the table too hard. Is it? Because you've been a mess since you saw them together. I haven't. Levy, I've known you for 15 years. You're completely wrecked. Over her. There was a tense silence, and then Levy's voice exploded in a way I'd rarely heard. And what do you want me to do? She's your sister. You always told me not to touch her. And besides, the silence that followed was heavy, loaded with something unspoken. Besides what? I moved closer to the door, my heart beating so hard I was afraid they could hear it. Levy's voice came out low, tired, and each word was like a blade cutting through my chest. Oliver, Misty will never stop being the annoying brat I met when she was 12. I tried, man. I tried to see her differently, as a woman, but it's impossible. It would be like betraying the family. She's your sister. She'll always be just that to me. Deep down, we have nothing in common. The world stopped. Annoying brat. Impossible to see her as a woman. She'll always be just that. Deep down, we have nothing in common. My hand covered my mouth, muffling the sound that threatened to escape. Tears burned my eyes, falling silently down my face as I backed away from the door, each step taking me away from those words, but never far enough to erase them from my mind. 8 years. 8 years waiting, believing, wanting, and all of it for what? To discover that he never really had seen me the way I needed to be seen. I found Samuel in the living room, my face still wet with tears I was frantically trying to wipe away. He saw me and immediately became alert, approaching with concern stamped on his face. "Hey, are you okay? You're crying?" "I am." My voice came out broken, weak. "Can you take me home? Please." He didn't hesitate. "Of course. What happened?" "I'll tell you later. Just get me out of here." I needed to leave, needed to breathe, needed to be anywhere that wasn't near Levi Bianchi, and his words that still echoed in my head like a cruel mantra. The city passed by the window in a blur of lights as Samuel drove in silence, respecting my space until I was ready to talk. When I finally found my voice, it came out small, hurt. "Want to talk about it?" I looked out the window, unable to face him as the words came out. I heard him, Levi, talking to Oliver. He said he'll never be able to see me as a woman, that I'm just an annoying brat, that it would be impossible. Samuel's silence was heavy, supportive. "Misty, I'm so sorry. I spent 8 years waiting." My voice broke, and I didn't try to hide it, thinking he just needed time, that he felt something but was afraid. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all those expectations crumbling. But no, he really doesn't want me. Never did. The things he said, that I like you, were just moments. Alcohol. Nothing real. Samuel drove for a few more blocks before speaking. "So it's over? For real?" I looked at him, seeing the careful hope in his eyes, and realized yes, it had to be. I couldn't keep going like this. Couldn't keep clinging to something that would never exist. "Yes, it's over. I'm not chasing anymore. I'm done." Then I took a deep breath, making a decision that felt simultaneously right and terrifying. "And if you still want to try with me for real, I'm open. Not now. I need time. But eventually." His smile was kind, understanding, everything I needed in that moment. "I'll wait, however long you need. Thank you for being patient and kind." Everything he wasn't. As Samuel drove through the dark streets of the city, I looked out the window and let the tears fall freely, knowing this was the last time I would cry over Levi Bianchi, the last time I would let his words destroy me, because tomorrow, when the sun rose, I would start rebuilding myself without him. Will Samuel really wait for our dear Misty for that long? Chapter 2: Disappearance and New Life.
I'm choosing myself now.
The weeks that followed that night passed in a silent and deliberate blur. I had blocked Levy's number on the second day, deleted all the photos where we appeared together on the third, and started systematically refusing all of Oliver's invitations that I knew would involve his presence. My brother's house, which used to be my second home, the place where I spent entire weekends laughing and living, now seemed like a minefield of memories I wasn't ready to face, so I simply stopped going. Work became my sacred refuge. Projects I used to delegate to the team now consumed my nights and weekends, filling every empty second with spreadsheets, endless meetings, and deadlines that gave me a concrete reason not to think about him. Pietra showed up at my apartment with Thai food and bad movies, forcing me to remember there was still life beyond the pain I was trying to bury under layers of productivity and denial, and Samuel was there, always patient, always kind, waiting for me to be ready without ever pressuring me or demanding anything. 3 weeks had passed when I received Oliver's 10th message asking if I was alive. I had answered the previous ones with vague excuses about work and exhaustion, but he was starting to get suspicious, and I knew I'd eventually have to face him. I just didn't imagine it would be so soon. My apartment doorbell rang on a Friday night, and when I opened the door, Oliver was there with 2 bags of Chinese food, and a determined expression I knew too well. It was the same face he made as a kid when he decided we were going to do something, no matter how much I resisted. "Hey, stranger." He walked in without waiting for an invitation, placing the bags on the kitchen table with a familiarity that made me feel guilty for avoiding him. 3 weeks without showing up, without calling, barely answering messages. "Are you going to tell me what happened, or do I have to guess?" I closed the door, leaning against it for a moment before following him to the kitchen. "I already told you. Work. I have several projects and—" "Lie." He cut me off, opening the food containers without looking at me. "You're avoiding me, and by extension, avoiding my house. Avoiding the parties. Avoiding—" He finally looked at me. "Avoiding Levy." Just hearing the name, my stomach tightened in that painful and familiar way. I grabbed a plate to have something to do with my hands. "I'm not avoiding anyone, Misty." His voice became softer, more serious. "I'm your brother. I've known when you're lying since you were 5 and swore it wasn't you who broke Mom's vase." He served food on my plate, then on his. "What happened at that party? You ran out with Samuel, and since then you've disappeared off the map." I sat at the table, pushing the rice from one side to the other with my fork, not really eating. For a long moment I considered telling everything, letting the words come out and sharing this weight with someone. But then I remembered Levy's voice saying those terrible things, the way my heart had shattered on the cold floor of that hallway, and I realized some wounds were too deep to be exposed. I'm just moving on, with my life. The answer came out more defensive than I intended. Oliver studied me in silence, that penetrating look that always managed to see through my defenses. With Samuel? Maybe, yes. I lifted my chin, defiant. Would that be a problem? No. He shook his head, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't fully identify. I just want to make sure it's what you really want. I don't want you doing this just to forget someone else. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. You don't need to worry about me, Ollie. I know what I'm doing. But even as the words came out, I wasn't sure if they were true. That same night, on the other side of town, in an apartment much larger and infinitely emptier than mine, Levy was pouring his third glass of whiskey when Oliver finally arrived. They had arranged to meet to discuss business, but Levy knew this wasn't a purely professional visit. There had been tension in the air since Oliver walked in, a coldness that didn't normally exist between them. Where's Misty? I haven't seen her in weeks. Levy tried to sound casual, but even he could hear the poorly disguised desperation in his own voice. Oliver poured himself whiskey, taking a long sip before answering. She's busy. Work. Life. You know how it is. Is she okay? The question came out before Levy could control himself. Oliver looked at him over his glass, and there was something cold in that look. Something Levy had never seen directed at him before. Why do you care? You made it pretty clear she's just an annoying brat to you. Levy froze, the glass stopping halfway to his mouth. The blood seemed to freeze in his veins as he processed the words. How did you— I never— She heard, idiot. Oliver placed his glass on the table hard enough to make the liquid overflow. Everything you said. Every poisonous word about how it's impossible to see her as a woman, about how she'll always be just the annoying little sister, about how you have nothing in common. His voice was loaded with contained anger, disappointment, something that looked a lot like betrayal. She was on the other side of that door, and heard you destroy 8 years of hope in less than a minute. Panic came fast and violent, closing Levy's throat in a way he wasn't prepared to deal with. He stood up from the chair so fast it almost toppled over. No, Oliver, I didn't mean that. I was lying to myself, trying to convince myself of something that isn't true. But she doesn't know that, does she? Oliver also stood up, facing his best friend with an expression that mixed anger and something very much like pity. She only knows that the man she loved for 8 years will never see her as a woman. That to you, she's just an annoying brat who'll never be good enough. That's not true. Levy ran his hands through his hair, desperation transforming his voice into something almost unrecognizable. Oliver, I need to talk to her. I need to explain that. She doesn't want to talk to you. Oliver interrupted him, relentless. She blocked your number, stopped going to my house, doesn't ask about you. Finally, after 8 years, she gave up. He grabbed his coat, walking toward the door before turning one last time. Congratulations, Levy. You got exactly what you said you wanted. She's out of your life. The door closed with a sound that echoed through the empty apartment, and Levy stood there, alone, the weight of his own words crushing his chest in a way that made it hard to breathe. He had ruined everything. He had hurt the only person who had never given up on him, who had waited and believed and wanted even when he didn't deserve it. And now she was leaving, moving on, and he was trapped in the lies he had told to protect himself from something that had never been a real threat. He loved Misty Berrycloth. He always had, and now it was too late. 2 days later, I was sitting in a cozy cafe downtown, waiting for Samuel to arrive for our lunch. The morning rain had given way to a timid sun coming through the large windows, illuminating the rustic wooden tables and making the aroma of fresh coffee seem even more inviting. When he walked in, shaking water drops from his coat and searching for me with his eyes until he found me, something in my chest relaxed in an unexpected way. He sat across from me with that easy smile that never had hidden ulterior motives, ordering a cappuccino from the waitress before giving me his full attention. You look different today. Different how? I grabbed my teacup, using it as a shield while I studied him over the rim. Lighter, he tilted his head, and there was genuine curiosity in his eyes, not judgment. Like a weight came off your shoulders, or at least got a little lighter. I laughed, but there was no real humor in the sound. I'm trying to move on, you know? It was hard, still is sometimes, but I decided I can't live my whole life waiting for someone who doesn't want me. His hand crossed the table slowly, giving me time to pull back if I wanted, but I didn't want to. His fingers touched mine gently, warm, comforting in a way that didn't demand anything beyond what I was ready to give. And how are you? Really? No filters? Honesty seemed like the only fair thing to offer someone who had been so patient with me. Some days are harder than others. I wake up in the middle of the night and for a second I forget it's over, that it never really started. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that still came in waves. But each day gets a little easier, and you help me a lot. Samuel intertwined his fingers in mine completely now, and there was something in the way he looked at me that made me want to be completely transparent with him, even if it hurt. I don't want to be the substitute, Misty. I don't want to be the guy you chose just because you couldn't have what you really wanted. You're not. And for the first time since that terrible night, I really believed my own words with every fiber of my being. You're new, different, good in a way I didn't know I needed. I squeezed his hand back, and I want to explore this with you. For real now, no reservations, without being stuck in the past. The smile he gave me was genuine, warm, without games or hidden agendas. Then let's go slow, at our pace. No pressure to be something we're not ready to be yet, and we'll see where it takes us. Slow sounds perfect. He leaned over the table, and I met him halfway. The kiss was soft, almost hesitant at first, testing and exploring with a delicacy that was completely different from everything I had imagined 1,000 times with Levy. There was no fire burning in my veins. There wasn't that crazy adrenaline that made me feel like I'd explode or disappear, but there was something else, something I was starting to value in a new way. Peace, comfort, the absolute certainty that the person in front of me really wanted to be there, with me, without running away or pulling back or making excuses. When we separated, I was really smiling for the first time in weeks, and it wasn't forced, wasn't fake. It was real. Want to do something on Saturday? Movies, dinner, a walk in the park, anything you want. Samuel was still holding my hand, his thumb making soft circles on the back of my hand. I'd love to. Anything sounds good, as long as it's with you. And when we left the cafe together a few hours later, holding hands under the weak afternoon sun, I didn't look back. I didn't search for shadows of a man who would never appear. Didn't wonder if Levy was thinking about me. For the first time in 8 years, I was looking forward, to the future, to someone who was really by my side. And maybe that was exactly what I always needed. Chapter 3. Levy loses it and first attempt.
I was a coward.
2 months exactly since I had left Oliver's party with a shattered heart and the certainty that I needed to move on, and I was managing it, slowly, one day at a time, rebuilding the pieces of the person I used to be before Levi Bianchi consumed my every thought. Samuel had become part of my routine in a gentle and natural way, without forcing anything, just being present when I needed him and giving me space when I asked. Dinners became a Tuesday and Thursday tradition, movies on Saturdays, walks in the park on Sundays when the weather allowed. I was starting to feel light again, almost whole, when my apartment doorbell rang on a Thursday night, outside the hours of any visit I'd expect. Pietro was traveling for work. Samuel had told me he had a meeting until late, and Oliver never showed up without warning after that tense conversation weeks ago. So when I looked through the peephole and saw who was on the other side, my heart stopped for a full second before beating again in a frantic and painful rhythm. Levy was there, standing in the dimly lit hallway of my building, with an appearance I had never seen before. He looked tired in a deep way, with dark circles under his eyes, his hair disheveled as if he'd run his hands through it many times, his shirt wrinkled in a way the meticulous Levy I knew would never allow. There was something desperate in his posture, in his tense shoulders, in the way he looked at the door as if he could see me through it. Every instinct screamed for me not to open it, to pretend I wasn't home and wait for him to leave. But there was a part of me, small and stubborn, that wanted to know what had brought him here after 2 months of absolute silence. So I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that were on edge, and opened the door just enough for him to see me. "Levy?" My voice came out firmer than I felt. "What are you doing here?" His eyes met mine immediately, and there was so much emotion in that dark gaze that for a second I forgot how to breathe. Relief, desperation, something that looked dangerously like need, all mixed together in an intensity that made me want to close the door and at the same time open it completely. "We need to talk." His voice came out hoarse, rough, as if he hadn't used it much in the last few hours. I laughed without any humor, the sound coming out more bitter than I intended. "We have nothing to talk about, Levy." I started to close the door, but his hand appeared quickly, holding the wood with enough force to stop the movement, but not enough to be aggressive. "Misty, please. 5 minutes, that's all." There was something in the way he said my name, in that tone that mixed pleading and desperation, that broke my resolve better than any argument could have. I sighed, feeling the exhaustion of this entire situation weigh on my shoulders, and opened the door a little more, stepping back to let him in even knowing I'd probably regret it. "Okay. Talk." He entered slowly, as if afraid I'd change my mind at any moment, and stood in the middle of my small living room, looking completely out of place among my comfortable furniture and soft decor. His hands were in his pockets, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was locked, as if he was holding himself together with all the strength he had. "What I said, to Oliver. You heard it?" he asked, but from his eyes, I knew he already knew the answer. The pain came fast, sharp as it always did when I thought about that night. but I had gotten good at controlling it, at not letting it destroy me completely. I heard every word. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if he'd taken a punch. I didn't mean it. I was lying to myself, trying to convince myself of something that was never true. Something hot and dangerous rose up my throat, a mixture of anger and hurt I'd been holding for 2 whole months. Lying! You were pretty clear, Levy. Annoying brat. Impossible to see me as a woman. Deep down, we have nothing in common. Pretty specific to be a lie. Because I was scared. His voice came out louder, more desperate, and he took a step toward me before controlling himself. Scared to admit what I feel. Scared to ruin everything with Oliver. With you. With the only good and pure thing that exists in my messed up life. I laughed, but there was nothing funny about that sound. It was dry, hurt, loaded with 8 years of frustration and disappointment. 8 years, Levy. You had 8 whole years to admit anything you felt, to do something, anything besides leaving me waiting and confused. I crossed my arms, using them as a physical barrier between us, and you never did. Always pulled back, always found a new excuse. So, I believe what you said that night. You don't want me, and that's okay. I accepted it. I moved on. With Samuel, the way he practically spat the name made something twist in my stomach. You barely know him. I've known him for months, and he treats me well. My voice became firmer, stronger, fueled by a righteous anger I didn't know I was carrying. He doesn't leave me waiting, doesn't confuse me with pretty words followed by silence. He wants to be with me. No excuses, no games, no pulling back every time things get real. Levy took another step toward me, and I could see frustration and desperation fighting on his face. But you don't love him? The truth of those words hit me like it always did, but I had learned to live with it. No, not yet. I kept my eyes fixed on his, refusing to look away, to show weakness. But I can love him. With time, with patience, with him showing me every day that I matter. I took a deep breath, feeling the next words burn on the way out. He's good, kind, present, everything you weren't. I saw the impact of those words on his face, the way he seemed to shrink inside even while maintaining his external posture. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried to find words that didn't come. Misty, but I was past my limit. 2 months of building walls around my heart, of trying to heal wounds that were 8 years deep. And he just showed up here expecting me to crumble and forgive him. Leave, Levy, please. My voice came out tired now, without anger, just exhausted. I'm trying to move on, build something new, something that doesn't constantly hurt me. You showing up here just makes everything harder. I walked to the door and opened it, keeping my expression neutral even with my heart beating erratically in my chest. He stood there for a long moment, looking at me as if trying to memorize every detail of my face, as if it were the last time he'd see me. Then, finally, he walked to the door with slow and heavy steps. When he passed me, he stopped for a second, so close I could feel his warmth, the familiar smell of his cologne mixed with whiskey and desperation. I'm sorry, for everything. His voice came out low, broken in a way I'd never heard before, but I didn't respond. I just waited for him to leave, and then closed the door softly, pressing my forehead against the cold wood, while listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Only when the sound of the elevator indicated he was completely gone did I let my body slide to the floor, hugging my knees to my chest while breathing deeply, trying to control the storm of emotions that threatened to swallow me. On the other side of the door, in the now empty hallway, Levy was standing in front of the elevator with his hand still on the call button, completely motionless. The conversation had gone exactly as Oliver had warned it would, and still he wasn't prepared for the pain he felt now, for the way each of her words had cut deeper than anything he'd ever faced in his dangerous years of life. She was right, about everything. He'd had 8 years, and had wasted every second with fear and indecision, and now she was moving on with someone who really deserved her, someone who wasn't afraid to show he wanted her. And Levy was on the outside, alone, destroyed by the weight of his own choices. The elevator arrived with a soft sound, the doors opening to reveal the empty and well-lit space. But Levy didn't get in. He stood there, looking at her apartment door as if willpower could make it open again, could make her change her mind, and give him one more chance he definitely didn't deserve. But the door remained closed, and eventually Levy entered the elevator, pressing the ground floor button harder than necessary. As he descended, he leaned his head against the cold metal wall, closing his eyes and trying not to think about the way Misty had looked at him, with that mixture of pain and determination that said more clearly than words that she had really given up. For the first time in his life, Levi Bianchi didn't have a plan, didn't have control, had no idea how to fix something he himself had broken so completely, and the feeling was absolutely terrifying. Now it might be too late for Levi to regret it, right? But there are still other twists to come in this story. Chapter 4. Samuel confronts Levi.
Fight for her properly. I will.
I was in the middle of a particularly tedious meeting about quarterly budgets when my phone vibrated on the table with a message from Samuel. Normally, I'd ignore it during work hours, but something about the timing made me look discreetly while my boss continued talking about profit margins and projections that seemed increasingly distant from reality. Need to tell you something. Can I pick you up after work? My stomach tightened in that instinctive way it always did when something seemed off. Samuel was never mysterious, never sent vague messages that left room for worry. He was direct, clear, consistent in everything he did. So this message left me restless for the rest of the afternoon, my mind wandering to bad possibilities while I tried to concentrate on spreadsheets and reports that seemed to make no sense at all. When I finally left the office at 6 in the evening, he was leaning against his car in front of the building, hands in his pockets, and an expression on his face I couldn't fully read. It wasn't exactly sad, but there was something serious there, something heavy that made me walk faster toward him. "Hey," he greeted me with a soft kiss on the cheek, opening the passenger door for me before walking around the car. "Thanks for leaving early. You scared me with that message." I put on my seatbelt as he started the car. "What happened?" He drove in silence for a few blocks, and I could see from the tension in his jaw that he was choosing his words carefully. Finally, when he stopped at a red light, he turned to look at me with those honest eyes that never hid anything. "I ran into Levy last night." My heart stopped, literally stopped for a second before beating again in a completely erratic rhythm. "You what?" I know. He started driving again when the light changed. "I should have told you before doing it, but it was an impulse decision, and I needed to do it for myself, not just for you." 1,000 questions exploded in my head at once, but the one that came out first was the most obvious. Why? Why would you go looking for Levy? Samuel parked in front of a small park near my apartment, turning off the engine before turning completely toward me, because I needed to know who I'm competing with. I needed to look him in the eyes and understand if he really wants you, or if it's just wounded ego from losing something he never valued when he had it. The raw honesty of those words left me speechless for a moment. I wanted to be mad at him for getting involved in something that wasn't his problem, but a part of me, small and curious, desperately wanted to know what had happened at that meeting. "And?" My voice came out lower than I intended. "What did you find out?" Samuel sighed, running his hand through his hair in a gesture I'd learned meant he was processing something complicated. "Can I tell you exactly how it went? I won't filter anything, but I need you to hear everything before reacting." I nodded, my heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. So Samuel began to tell me, and as his words painted the scene, I could see everything unfolding in my mind like a movie I hadn't asked to watch but couldn't stop. The bar was one of those discreet places men like Levy frequented when they wanted to be alone with their thoughts, and a bottle of expensive whiskey. Samuel had found out where he'd be through Oliver, who apparently was as tired of watching his best friend destroy himself as I was of dealing with this whole situation. Levy was sitting in the darkest corner of the place, a half-empty glass in front of him, and the bottle within arm's reach, his eyes lost on some undefined point ahead. Samuel approached without announcing his presence, simply pulling the stool next to him and sitting down with the calm confidence of someone who had nothing to fear. Levy raised his eyes slowly, and from what Samuel told me, it took a few seconds for recognition to appear, followed immediately by tension. "Samuel." Levy's voice had come out neutral, too controlled to be natural. "What do you want?" "To talk. About Misty." Samuel had ordered a glass of water from the bartender, completely ignoring the tension emanating from the man beside him. Levy had gone rigid, his fingers gripping the glass hard enough to make his knuckles white. "I have nothing to say about her to you, but I do." Samuel had turned to face him directly, without hostility, but also without backing down. "Look, I know you're in love with her, always have been, and I know you're the idiot who took 8 years to realize what he had." He had paused, letting the words sink in, "But I didn't come to fight. I came to tell you something you need to hear." Levy hadn't responded, just waited with that barely contained impatience that was characteristic of him. "She's trying to move on with me." Samuel had kept his voice firm, honest, and I really like her. I'm going to treat her well, give her what she deserves, what she always deserved but never had. The provocation had been subtle but effective. Levy had turned completely on the stool, and Samuel told me that for the first time he saw up close that dangerous intensity that made him the boss he was. "You think you deserve her? More than you." Samuel hadn't hesitated. "Yes, because I'm here, present, not running, not making excuses, not saying one thing and doing something completely different." I could imagine how those words had hit Levy, could visualize the pain and anger fighting on his face. Samuel continued telling me, his voice soft but firm as he reconstructed each moment. But I also know she still thinks about you. Not always, not like before, but sometimes. Samuel had admitted this with an honesty that must have cost him dearly. And I know I'm competing with 8 years of history, with a first love that marked her in ways it'll take me time to fully understand. Levy had leaned forward, and Samuel told me he saw hope ignite in those dark eyes. She thinks about me? Yes, but less every day. The answer had been kind but relentless. Because I'm replacing you. Slowly, with patience, showing her that love doesn't have to hurt, that it doesn't have to come with confusion and constant pulling back. Samuel had taken a sip of water before continuing. And if you don't act, soon she won't think about you anymore, and then you've lost, forever. The silence that had followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Levy had spoken, his voice coming out more vulnerable than Samuel expected. "What do you want me to do?" And here, Samuel told me, was where he had made the decision that would change everything. He could have lied, could have discouraged Levy, could have protected his own interest, but he did none of that. Fight for her, for real, not with empty words or promises you won't keep, with actions. Show you've changed, that you want her, that you're finally ready to be the man she deserves. Samuel had kept his eyes fixed on Levy's. But know this, I'm not going to give up easily. You're going to have to beat me. You're going to have to prove you're better for her than I am. And it won't be easy, because I'm going to fight too. Levy had been silent for a long moment before asking the question that was obviously burning on his tongue. Why are you telling me this? You want me to fight? Doesn't that go against your own interests? And Samuel's answer, when he told me, was the most beautiful and painful thing I'd ever heard. Because I want her to be happy. Really, deeply happy. And if that happiness is you, I accept it. I hate it, but I accept it. He had stood up then, putting money on the counter to pay for the water. But you have to deserve it, Levy. You have to prove it. Because if you hurt her again, I'll be there. And next time, you won't get another chance. When Samuel finished telling me, we were still sitting in the parked car, and I was looking at him with tears in my eyes that I hadn't even noticed had started falling. He reached out, wiping a tear with his thumb, that gentle touch that had become so familiar. "Are you mad at me?" he asked, and there was real vulnerability in his voice. I shook my head, unable to speak for a moment. When I finally found my voice, it came out broken with emotion. "How can you be so incredibly good? Because you deserve kindness, Misty. You deserve someone who puts your happiness above their own ego." He held my face with both hands. "Even if that means helping another guy win you. This is crazy." I laughed through the tears. "Completely insane." "Maybe," he smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes that broke me a little. "But it's true. I want you. A lot. But I want you to be happy more. And if I have to compete honestly to have that chance, then so be it." I pulled him into a tight hug, hiding my face in his shoulder while processing everything he had told me. Levy was going to fight, for real this time, and Samuel wasn't going to give up either, and I was in the middle, having to eventually make a choice that seemed impossible. Because a part of me, that part that had loved Levy for 8 years, still wanted to believe he could change. But the other part, the one that was starting to heal, the one that was learning what it was like to be treated well, didn't know if I could risk it again. "What do I do?" I whispered against his shoulder. "You don't do anything yet." Samuel kissed the top of my head. "You let us fight. Let us show who we really are. And when you're ready, you choose who makes you happiest, who deserves you most, who you really want." And as we sat there in the car, embraced and silent, I knew my life was about to get much more complicated, because a determined Levy Bianchi was a force of nature, and Samuel Grant in love was unshakable, and me, I was in the middle of a storm I had helped create. We're definitely in the middle of a love triangle, but who will be victorious in the end? Chapter 5. Levy tries and Misty resists.
It's not enough anymore.
The first time I saw Levy after the conversation with Samuel was completely by accident, or at least I wanted to believe it was. It was a Tuesday morning, and I had arranged to have coffee with Samuel before work at our favorite place, that small cozy cafe 3 blocks from my office that made the best croissants in the city. We were sitting near the window, laughing about something silly he'd told me about a difficult client, when I felt that familiar shiver on the back of my neck, that sensation of being watched that I'd developed over years of paying attention to Levy Bianchi. I raised my eyes instinctively and saw him standing on the other side of the street, hands in the pockets of his dark coat, his gaze fixed directly on me through the glass. Our eyes met for a second that seemed to stretch infinitely, and I saw the way he looked at Samuel beside me, at our intertwined hands on the table, at the smile still on my face. Then, before I could fully process what was happening, he simply turned and left, disappearing among the people on the sidewalk as if he'd never been there. "You okay?" Samuel's voice brought me back, and when I looked at him, there was genuine concern in his eyes. "Yeah, just thought I saw someone I knew." The lie came out easily, but from the way Samuel squeezed my hand, I knew he didn't completely believe it. The next day, flowers arrived at my office. They weren't cliché red roses or a generic supermarket bouquet. They were white lilies, my favorites. The ones I had mentioned just once years ago in a casual conversation I didn't even think Levy had paid attention to. The card was simple, just 3 words in handwriting I recognized as his. "I'm sorry, please." My assistant placed the vase on my desk with a conspiratorial smile, clearly thinking they were from Samuel and that there was romance in the air. But when I picked up the card and saw the handwriting, my stomach twisted in a complicated way I didn't want to analyze too deeply. I looked at the flowers for a long moment, feeling the temptation to keep them, to accept this small gesture as a step in the right direction. But then I remembered the words he had said, the way he had hurt me, and I knew I couldn't give in that easily. I picked up the vase and asked my assistant to return it to the florist with a simple message. Recipient refused. I saw the confusion on her face, but she didn't question it, just took the flowers and left. And I went back to work, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest that came whenever I thought about Levy receiving the news that I had returned his gesture. The messages started that same night. There weren't many. They weren't desperate or insistent, just constant. "Can we talk? I know I don't deserve it, but please give me a chance. Are you okay? I miss you." Each notification made my heart jump, but I didn't answer any of them. I left them there, unread, accumulating like small pieces of evidence that he was trying, but not enough to change how I felt. Pietro was at my apartment on Friday night, the two of us sitting on my living room floor with a bottle of cheap wine and Thai food scattered between us. When I finally vented about everything that was happening, she listened in silence, eating pad thai straight from the box, that analytical look she always had when processing important information. "He doesn't give up." My voice came out louder, more frustrated than I intended. "All the time there's something. Him showing up. Flowers, messages. I heard from Oliver that he's constantly asking about me. It's like he doesn't understand it's over, that I don't want this anymore." Pietra took a sip of wine before responding, choosing her words carefully. "Because he finally realized he wants you, for real, and he's terrified of having lost you forever. It's too late." I put my glass down hard on the coffee table. "I'm not going back. I can't. Not after everything that happened. Everything he said. But do you still love him?" The question came soft, but hit like a punch. I stayed silent, looking at the wine in my glass, as if the answers might be floating there. "I don't know. Part of me does. That stupid part that spent 8 years waiting and believing." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the confession. "But Samuel is good, Pietra. He makes me happy. For real. It's not that intense and painful happiness Levy gave me, that constant roller coaster of hope and disappointment. With Samuel, it's peace, stability. I wake up in the morning and know what to expect. Know he won't pull back or disappear." Pietra studied me for a long moment before speaking. "Then stay with Samuel, and forget Levy. Block his messages. Stop paying attention when he shows up. Make it very clear it's over." "I'm trying." But even as I said it, I knew there was a part of me that didn't want to completely forget, that still held on to a ridiculous spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. At the same time, on the other side of town, Levy was standing in front of Oliver's house with his hands in his pockets, and an expression that mixed desperation and determination. He had called earlier asking to talk, and Oliver had agreed with a reluctance that made it clear he was still angry, that their friendship was hanging by a very thin thread that could break at any moment. Oliver opened the door before Levy even rang the bell, as if he'd been watching from the window. He said nothing, just stepped aside to let Levy in, and the two went to the office in heavy and uncomfortable silence. Oliver poured whiskey for both without asking, an old tradition of theirs that now seemed loaded with bitter irony. "Help. Please, she won't listen to me." Levy didn't waste time with preambles, his voice coming out tired in a way he rarely showed. Oliver took a long sip before responding, his eyes fixed on his friend, with an expression that mixed residual anger and something that looked a lot like pity. "Why would I help? You hurt my sister. Hurt her deeply. For years. I know." Levy's explosion was sudden, frustration finally overflowing. "And I regret it. Every second, every word, every time I pulled back when I should have stayed." He ran his hands through his hair, messing it up even more. "Oliver, I love her. Always have. I was just too scared to admit it, to ruin everything." "Scared of what?" Oliver leaned forward, genuinely wanting to understand. "Of me? Of what I'd think? Of you hating me? Of not being good enough for her? Of bringing her into my world and seeing her get hurt because of who I am and what I do?" The words came out in a flood, years of fear and insecurity finally coming to the surface. "She's light, Oliver, pure and good and bright, and I'm darkness, violence, danger. How could I think I deserved her? How could I expose her to that?" Oliver was silent for a moment, processing. "And now? What changed?" "Now I don't care about any of that anymore." Levy looked directly into his friend's eyes. I just want her, even if you hate me for it, even if I really don't deserve it, even if my world is dangerous. I'll protect her. I'll do everything differently, but I need her, and I'm going to fight. For real this time. The tension in the air was palpable, as Oliver considered his best friend's words. He had seen Levy in many situations over the years, had seen him face dangerous enemies and impossible negotiations, but had never seen this raw vulnerability, this genuine desperation that was stamped on his face now. Okay, Oliver finally sighed, putting his glass on the table. I'll help you. But if you hurt her again, Levy, the friendship's over. 15 years of history goes in the trash, and I'm not kidding when I say I'll make you pay for it. Fair. More than fair. Levy accepted the terms without hesitation. What do I do? How do I reach her? Oliver stood up, walking to the window with his hands in his pockets, clearly thinking about how to approach this. Stop showing up. Stop pressuring with flowers and messages and constant contact attempts. You're suffocating her, making her close up more. But I need to show I've changed that, and you will show her. Oliver interrupted him. But not like this. Give her space to breathe, to let her guard down. And when the right moment comes, when she's not so defensive, you show her, with action, not with words or empty gestures, with real, tangible change that she can see and feel. Levy absorbed the words, each one making sense even as it went against every instinct of his that screamed to keep trying, not to give up. Space, and then action, he repeated more to himself than to Oliver. Exactly. And Levy? Oliver turned to face him completely. This means really changing, not just for her, but for yourself too. Be the man she deserves, not the coward you were for 8 years. The words hurt, but Levy knew they were true. He had been a coward, had chosen fear instead of courage, the safety of non-rejection instead of the risk of real love. And now he was paying the price for it, watching the woman he loved move on with another man while he stayed behind, alone with his regret. But not anymore. This time would be different. He'd give the space Oliver suggested, would use that time to really change, to become someone worthy of her love. And when the right moment came, he'd prove he was no longer the man who had run away so many times. He'd be the man who stayed. When Levy left Oliver's house that night, there was a new determination in his chest, a purpose that went beyond immediate desperation. And as he drove through the dark streets of the city, he made a silent promise to himself and to the woman he loved. Even though she couldn't hear him, he would deserve her, no matter how long it took, no matter what he had to do. He would prove he had changed, that he'd grown, that he was finally ready to be what she always needed. And then maybe, just maybe, she'd give him the chance he definitely didn't deserve, but for which he was willing to fight with every fiber of his being. Chapter 6. 3 months and Misty happy.
I feel safe with you.
You are safe with me.
3 months had passed since that devastating night at Oliver's party, and it was strange how time had this ability to soften even the deepest wounds when you really allowed yourself to heal. It wasn't that the pain had completely disappeared. It wasn't that I had forgotten everything that happened or erased 8 years of history with a simple snap of my fingers. But it was different now, more distant, like a scar that was still there, but didn't hurt anymore when you touched it. Samuel had become an official part of my life in a way that felt simultaneously natural and surprising. There was no dramatic moment where we decided to date, no deep conversation about labels and expectations. It was more like one day I woke up and realized he was already woven into every part of my routine, that the idea of not having him there seemed strange and incomplete. He had a toothbrush in my bathroom, some clothes hanging in my closet, and his laughter had become the most familiar sound in my apartment. Oliver had officially met him last month, at a dinner I had spent weeks dreading, and that ended up being surprisingly smooth. My brother had been protective as always, asking the hard questions, and observing every reaction with that analytical look of his. But by the end of the night, he had pulled me aside and whispered that he approved, that Samuel seemed like a good man, someone who really cared about me. Coming from Oliver, that meant more than he probably realized. We had traveled to the beach 2 weeks ago, just a long weekend where we did nothing but walk on the sand, eat seafood that was too fresh, and watch the sunset painting the sky impossible colors. It was there, with my feet buried in the sand, still warm from the day, and the sound of waves creating a constant rhythm in the background, that I realized I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. It wasn't that sharp and intense happiness that came accompanied by anxiety and fear of losing everything at any moment. It was something softer, deeper, more sustainable. It was a Friday night, and we were at a small, intimate Italian restaurant that Samuel had discovered a few weeks ago, and that had quickly become our favorite place for special occasions. The lighting was low and romantic, candles flickering on each table, and the smell of garlic and fresh herbs floating through the warm air. I had ordered the mushroom risotto, which was divine, and Samuel was working on a pasta dish he insisted was the best he'd ever had in his life, even though he'd said the same thing the last 3 times we came here. I watched him as he talked animatedly about a new project at work, gesticulating with his fork in a way that was so characteristically him, it made me smile without realizing it. There was something comforting about knowing someone so well, being able to predict the small quirks and expressions, having that silent intimacy that only came with time and genuine attention. "Thank you." The words came out abruptly, interrupting his story about a difficult client. He stopped mid-sentence, blinking in surprise. For what? For being patient with me, for waiting for me to heal, for not pressuring me, for being here even when I was messy and confused. I took his hand on the table, intertwining our fingers, for showing me it can be different, that it can be good without being painful. The expression on his face became more serious, softer, and he turned my hand to kiss my fingers gently. "Are you healed? Or at least closer to it?" I considered the question honestly before answering. Almost. I still think about him sometimes, especially when something reminds me of some old memory. Honesty was something I had learned to value with Samuel, the way he always received my truths without judgment or hurt. But it doesn't hurt anymore, not the way it hurt before. It's just memory now, part of the past that brought me here but doesn't define me anymore. He squeezed my hand, and there was something in his eyes that made my heart race in a completely different way from the painful adrenaline Levy used to provoke. It was good anticipation, that feeling of being on the edge of something important. And us? How do you feel about us? I really like you. Us. How easy and good and real it is. The words came out naturally, without the weight of years of baggage and unfulfilled expectations. I like waking up and knowing you'll be there, making plans and being sure you won't cancel or disappear. I like how you make me laugh and how you really listen when I talk. Samuel took a deep breath, and I could see he was gathering courage to say something important. "Misty, I know it's still relatively early, that we've only been together officially for 3 months, but I need to tell you something." He kept his eyes fixed on mine, vulnerable and brave at the same time. "I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I've already fallen completely. I'm not sure where to draw that exact line, but I know that when I think about the future, you're there. Always." My heart raced, but it wasn't panic or fear like it would have been a few months ago. It was something warmer, more promising, like the beginning of something that could grow into something beautiful if I let it. I'm getting there too. It's not complete love yet the way I know it can be, but it's growing every day. I squeezed his hand, wanting him to understand completely. "And it feels good, Samuel. It grows without pain, without fear, without that constant anxiety. It's like planting something knowing it will bloom, not like chasing something that always escapes." The smile he gave me was radiant, genuine, full of hope and happiness that made me want to protect this moment, keep it forever. He leaned over the table, and I met him halfway, our lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of promise and new beginnings. It wasn't explosive or desperate, didn't have that intensity that burned everything in its path. It was sweet and deep and full of silent certainty that this right here was real in a sustainable way. When we separated, I was smiling against his lips, and the world around us had completely disappeared, reduced to just this table, this candle, this perfect and simple moment. Across the street, hidden in the shadows between 2 buildings, Levi Bianchi was standing watching through the restaurant window, with his heart slowly being torn apart in his chest. He had promised Oliver he'd give space, that he wouldn't show up or pressure or do anything that could scare her even more. And he had kept that promise religiously for 3 whole months, each day being a silent torture of not knowing how she was, of imagining what was happening, of wondering if she thought about him even for a second. But he hadn't been able to resist completely. From afar, always from afar, he watched, never close enough for her to notice, never invasive enough to be stalking, but enough to see she was okay, that she was happy, that she was shining in a way he had rarely seen when she was near him. And now, seeing her through that window with Samuel, seeing the way she smiled without reservations, how she held his hand on the table, how she kissed him with that softness that spoke of comfort and certainty, something inside Levi broke in a new way. Because for the first time, he really understood he could lose her forever, that it was no longer a matter of time or strategy or waiting for the right moment. She was really moving on, building something real with another man, and he was on the outside, looking into a life that could have been his if he hadn't been such a coward. He rested his forehead against the cold wall of the building next door, closing his eyes and trying to control the pain that threatened to suffocate him. She deserved this, he knew. Deserved the happiness she was radiating. Deserved someone who didn't constantly pull back, who didn't make her feel like she was always waiting for the next disappointment. Samuel was good for her in all the ways Levi had failed to be. But even knowing that, even accepting she deserved every second of happiness she was experiencing, Levi couldn't give up completely. Not yet. There was a part of him, stubborn and desperate, that still believed that if he could have a real chance, an opportunity to show he had changed, that he had grown, that he was finally ready to be the man she needed. Maybe, just maybe, she could choose him. He opened his eyes, looking once more through the window where Misty was laughing at something Samuel had said, her head thrown back and happiness so palpable he could almost feel it from here. And even though it hurt, even though every second watching was like small stabs to the heart, he couldn't look away. She deserves this, he whispered to himself, the words being carried away by the cold night wind. She deserves to be happy, even if it's not with me. But then, in an even lower whisper, so low it was barely audible, he added, but I'm not giving up. Not yet. Not until I'm absolutely certain there's no chance left, that she really loves him, in a way that leaves no room for me. And with that silent promise burning in his chest, Levy finally stepped away from the window, shoving his hands in his pockets, and walking through the dark streets toward his car. Each step taking him away from her, but each heartbeat keeping him connected to the only woman he had truly loved, to the only person who made his world make sense, even when everything else was chaos. He would wait. He would give the space Oliver had suggested. He would use that time to really become someone worthy of her. And when the right moment came, if it came, he would fight with everything he had. Not with fear or hesitation, but with the certainty that she was everything he ever wanted, and everything he was willing to risk everything to have. Because Levi Bianchi had finally learned a crucial lesson. Some things in life were worth fighting for, worth the risk, worth giving up control and safety. And Misty Berrycloth was definitely one of those things, maybe the only one that really mattered. Inside the restaurant, completely oblivious to the man watching her from the shadows, I finished my risotto while Samuel told more stories, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel that pang of guilt or sadness when I thought about the future. I could see it clearly now, bright and possible, and Samuel was there, smiling beside me, holding my hand and making plans that included both of us. And maybe, just maybe, this was exactly where I was meant to be from the beginning. After so much wavering, Levi will fight to the end. But will it be enough? Chapter 7. Grand Gesture.
I need time to choose.
Take all the time you need.
And confrontation. My 25th birthday arrived on a sunny Friday that seemed to have been specially ordered for the occasion. Oliver had insisted on throwing a party at his house. Nothing too big or extravagant, just close and important people who were part of my life. I had resisted at first, still carrying that residual hesitation about being in places that had so many memories of Levi. But my brother had been insistent in a way that made it clear he wouldn't accept no as an answer. The house was beautiful when I arrived, decorated with soft lights and white flowers that Oliver knew I loved. Music playing at perfect volume that allowed conversations without having to shout. Pietra had arrived before me and was already running things like she always did, making sure everything was perfect and exactly how I'd like it. Samuel was by my side, his hand warm and comforting on my back as we greeted people, and there was something deeply satisfying about having him there with me, introducing him to friends and colleagues as my boyfriend without hesitation or doubt. The hours passed in a pleasant blur of conversations, laughter, delicious food, and wine that flowed freely. I had just cut the cake, surrounded by people singing happy birthday off-key and enthusiastically, when I realized I was genuinely happy in a complete and uncomplicated way. There was no pang of sadness or feeling that something was missing. It was all there, everything I needed, everything that mattered. As the night progressed, people started leaving gradually, until only a few close friends remained. Pietra, Oliver, and Samuel. I was starting to feel the pleasant exhaustion of a day well lived when I decided I needed a moment alone, just a few minutes of silence to process everything and let the happiness of the day settle completely. The terrace had always been my favorite place at Oliver's house, that open space with a view of the city lights stretching as far as the eye could see. I went out through the glass door, the fresh night air touching my skin warmed by wine and party heat, and walked to the railing, resting my hands on the cold metal surface while breathing deeply and letting the moment envelop me. Misty. My entire body froze at the sound of that voice. I hadn't heard it in 3 months, had gotten used to its absence, had learned to live without expecting to hear it on every corner. And now it was here, real and too close, making my heart race in a chaotic rhythm I didn't want to analyze too deeply. I turned slowly, and there he was, Levi Bianchi standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets and an expression on his face that mixed determination and vulnerability in a way I'd never seen before. He was different somehow, not physically maybe, but there was something in his eyes, in the way he looked at me, that seemed fundamentally changed. I sighed, feeling the emotional exhaustion arrive suddenly. Levi, what are you doing here? He took a cautious step toward me, as if approaching a scared animal that could flee at any moment. I know you don't want to see me. I know you're happy, with Samuel, really happy. I can see that. His voice came out softer than I expected. And I'm glad you're happy. Truly. You deserve that more than anyone I know. I crossed my arms over my chest, creating a physical barrier between us. Then why are you here? If you really were happy about my happiness, you'd leave me alone. Because before you move on completely, before it's too late and there's no going back, I need to tell the truth. All of it. Without fear, without excuses, without hiding behind lies, I tell myself. He stopped, and I could see the way his hands trembled slightly in his pockets, the only external sign of the nervousness he must be feeling. I love you, Misty. I always have. Since you were 18 and I was 24. Since that party where you wore that blue dress and I thought for the first time, shit, she's not a kid anymore. My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. Tears started burning my eyes, but I fought against them, refusing to let them fall. Levy, don't do this. Let me finish. Please, just this once. He waited until I made a minimal gesture of agreement before continuing. I was a coward for 8 whole years. I pretended I didn't feel what I felt, pulled back every time I almost gave in, made up excuses and reasons and fears that seemed valid, but deep down were just ways to protect myself. His voice broke slightly. And what I said to Oliver, those terrible words you heard, they were the biggest lie I ever told, because I see you, as a woman, as the most beautiful, strong, and incredible woman I've ever met. And that terrified me, because if I admitted it, everything would change and I didn't know if I was ready to deal with that. The tears finally started falling, silent and hot down my face. And you preferred to hurt me than to risk. Preferred to destroy me than face your own fears. Yes, the admission came without hesitation. Raw and honest. And it was the worst mistake of my life. The mistake I'll carry forever, no matter what happens after this. He took another step, now close enough for me to see every detail of his face, every emotion passing through his dark eyes. But now I'm not afraid anymore. I want you, I love you, and I'm going to fight for you. Even if you choose him, even if you hate me, even if it's too late. I'll show you every day that I've changed, that I'm finally ready to be the man you always deserved. It's too late, Levy. My voice came out broken, soaked with tears and years of accumulated pain. I'm with Samuel. I like him. He treats me well, makes me happy without all this pain and confusion. He's present. He doesn't run. He doesn't leave me waiting and wondering if I'm good enough. I know. And he's a good man. Better than I deserved to be all those years. Levy moved even closer, and now I could feel his warmth, that magnetic attraction that always existed between us, vibrating in the air between our bodies. But do you love him? Really? The way you loved me all those years? The silence stretched as I struggled with the honest answer. Finally, because lying had never been my style, I whispered, no, not yet, but I can love him with time. He's showing me that. Then give me a chance. Before you fall completely in love with him, before there's no room left for anything but what you have. His voice was loaded with desperate urgency. Let me show you I can make you happy too, without pain, without games, without pulling back. That I've learned, that I've changed, that I finally understood what I lost and what I want to get back. I ran my hands over my face, wiping the tears that kept falling. I don't know if I can, Levy. I don't know if I can trust you again. Risk my heart one more time with someone who's already broken it so many times. Then don't trust. Don't risk everything at once. He extended his hand, stopping a few inches from touching my face, waiting for permission I didn't give. Just let me try. Let me compete with him for your heart, fairly, honestly, and you choose who makes you happiest, who deserves you most, who you really want. That's not fair to Samuel. The words came out weak, without real conviction. It's not, Levy agreed immediately. But it's also not fair to you to stay with him, without being absolutely certain, without knowing if we could have been more, if it could have worked if I'd been brave from the beginning. She's right. It's not fair to me. We both turned sharply toward the terrace door, where Samuel was standing with a calm but serious expression on his face. My stomach dropped, panic and guilt exploding in my chest, as I realized he had heard everything, every word of this impossible conversation. Samuel, I started, but he gently raised his hand, asking me to stop. He walked toward us with measured steps, stopping beside me but keeping enough distance not to be invasive. His eyes went from me to Levy and back, and there was a maturity in that look that made me love him a little more and feel worse at the same time. I heard, and as much as it hurts to admit, he's right. Samuel looked directly into my eyes. You deserve to know, deserve to be absolutely certain of what you want, of who you choose. I don't want you with me if there are doubts, if part of you keeps wondering, what if? That's not fair to either of us. You two are completely impossible. More tears fell now, a chaotic mixture of frustration, love, fear, and a dozen other emotions I couldn't name. Levy looked at Samuel with something that looked a lot like respect, We both love you, and we want your happiness above everything, even our own desires. Even if that happiness isn't with me, even if it's not with me, Samuel echoed, and there was sadness in his eyes, but also a quiet strength that spoke to the man he was. I looked between the two of them, these two completely different men who were offering me something that seemed simultaneously impossible and necessary. Finally, I took a deep breath, trying to find some sanity in the middle of this emotional chaos. Okay, my voice came out firmer than I felt. I'll think about it. Alone. Without pressure from either of you. Without seeing you or talking to you. I looked at both of them, making sure they understood. Give me 2 weeks, 14 days to process everything, to understand what I really want, to be sure of whatever decision I make, and after that, I choose. And whatever that choice is, you both have to accept and respect it. Deal, Levy said immediately. Deal. Samuel agreed right after. And there, on the terrace lit only by the city lights below, with tears still drying on my face, and my heart torn between past and present, between what was and what could be, I made a silent promise that in 2 weeks, I would have an answer, a final choice that would change the course of everything. I just had no idea what that choice would be. And now, who do you think will win her heart? Samuel or Levy? Who do you prefer to win? Chapter 8, 2 weeks and choice.
I choose you.
The 2 weeks that followed were the longest and quietest of my life. I had turned off phone notifications for Samuel and temporarily blocked Levy's number, not out of anger or fear, but because I needed this complete silence to really hear my own thoughts without the constant interference of messages or calls. I requested a few days off work, making up an excuse about personal commitments that my boss didn't question, and spent most of the time in my apartment, alone with my thoughts, and a concerning amount of tea. Pietra respected my request for space for the first 10 days, but on the 11th she simply showed up at my door with Chinese food and a bottle of wine, entering without waiting for an invitation, and settling on my couch as if she owned the place. I didn't protest, because deep down I knew I needed this. Needed someone to help me organize the chaos happening inside my head. We ate in silence for a while, just the sound of forks on cardboard plates breaking the comfortable silence that only existed between people who'd known each other long enough not to need to fill every second with words. Finally, when we finished eating and were on our second glass of wine, Pietra turned to me with that direct look that didn't accept evasions. Who do you want, Misty? Really, without thinking about who you should want, or what makes more sense, or what hurts less. Just look inside your heart and tell me who's there. I was silent for a long moment, swirling the wine in my glass and watching the red liquid reflect the soft light of the room. I don't know. I know, but I don't want to know, if that makes any sense. I sighed, trying to find the right words. Samuel gives me peace, security, happiness without all that pain and constant anxiety. With him, I know what to expect. I don't lie awake in the middle of the night wondering if he's going to disappear or pull back, or decide I'm not good enough. It's comfortable and good and real. But Pietra knew me too well not to notice there was a giant but hanging at the end of that sentence. But Levy is... I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that came whenever I thought about him. He's intense. Always has been. He makes me feel too much. Too strongly, sometimes even painfully. But when he said he loves me on that terrace, when he looked at me that way, my heart recognized it. Like finally, after 8 years, I'd heard the words I'd been waiting for all along. Pietra took a sip of wine, studying me with that analytical expression of hers. So you still love him? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes, I love him. Always have, even when I tried to stop. Even when I was with Samuel and was genuinely happy, there was always that part of me that belonged to Levy, and that I could never fully get back. Tears started burning my eyes, but I'm so scared, Pietra. Scared he'll pull back again. Hurt me even worse than he already has. That I'll risk everything and find out he's still the same person who chose fear instead of me for 8 years. And Samuel... Do you love him? The question came gentle but direct. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to be completely honest. I like him a lot. I could love him with time and patience, and it would be a good and healthy and stable love. But it's not that love, you know? Not the kind that burns and consumes and makes you feel like you'll die if you don't have that person. I looked at my best friend through the tears. With Samuel, it's a soft and constant flame. With Levy, it's a fire that can destroy me or completely transform me. Pietra put her glass aside and took my hand, squeezing hard. Then you already know the answer, girl. You're just scared to admit it, because it means risking again, means being vulnerable with someone who's already hurt you before. What if I'm making the wrong choice? What if I choose Levy and he goes back to being who he was? What if I hurt Samuel, who never did anything but be perfect? for someone who might not deserve this chance. No one can give you that guarantee. Love is always a risk. There's always a chance of getting hurt. Pietra squeezed my hand harder, but you have to choose who's worth the risk. And from the way you talk about him, how your eyes shine even through the tears when you say his name, I think you already know who it is. We spent the rest of the night talking about everything and nothing, and when Pietra finally left well after midnight, I was alone in the silence of my apartment, with the crystal clarity that she was right. I knew who I wanted, always knew. I just needed to find the courage to admit it and deal with the consequences of that choice. The cafe I chose for the final meetings was neutral, a territory that didn't belong to either of us, and therefore didn't carry memories or expectations. I scheduled with Samuel for 2 in the afternoon, and with Levy for 3, giving enough time between them so there was no chance of them running into each other and making everything even more complicated than it already was. Samuel arrived exactly on time, as always, and when our eyes met through the glass before he entered, I saw he already knew. There was a gentle resignation on his face, an acceptance that spoke to the mature and understanding man he was. He sat across from me, ordering coffee from the waitress before turning completely to me with those honest eyes that never hid anything. I took a deep breath, feeling the words weigh on my tongue. Samuel, you're amazing. Kind, patient, present in all the ways that matter. You made me happy when I was completely broken, helped me heal wounds that were 8 years deep, showed me that love can be good and simple and without constant pain. My voice trembled slightly, and I'm eternally grateful for every second we spent together, for every laugh and conversation and moment of peace you gave me. He took my hand on the table, a gentle and comforting touch that was so characteristic of him. But I still love Levy, always have, even when I tried with all my strength to love you the same way. The tears started falling, and I didn't try to stop them. And it's not fair to you. You deserve someone who loves you completely, without reservations, without parts of their heart belonging to someone else. You deserve to be someone's first choice, not the safe comfort when the first option didn't work out. Samuel was silent for a moment, his thumb making soft circles on the back of my hand. When he spoke, there was sadness in his eyes, but also a deep understanding that made me love him even more, even as I let him go. I understand, and thank you for being honest, for not dragging me into something where your heart isn't completely present. He smiled, but it was a sad smile. He's very lucky that you chose him even after everything. And you're going to find someone who chooses you first. Always. Someone who sees how special you are and never has doubts. I squeezed his hand back, wanting him to feel the sincerity of my words. He stood up, walking around the table to kiss my forehead gently and finally. Take care of yourself, and if he screws up again, if he's not the man he promised to be, you know where to find me. I'll still be here. Thank you for everything, for being exactly what I needed when I needed it most. And then he was gone, leaving the cafe with firm steps and head held high, and I sat there alone with tears running down my face and a huge weight lifting from my shoulders. The first part was done. Now came the hardest part. 30 minutes passed in an anxious eternity. I had dried the tears, redone my makeup in the cafe bathroom, ordered another tea that went cold without me touching it. Every second that passed made my heart beat faster, my breathing become harder, my determination waver a little more. And then the cafe door opened and Levi Bianchi walked in, and everything else simply disappeared. He saw me immediately, and the way his eyes lit up even through the obvious tension and nervousness made something tighten in my chest. He walked to my table with steps that tried to seem confident, but carried a hesitation I rarely saw in him, sitting in the chair Samuel had occupied half an hour before, with a caution that spoke to how much this conversation meant to him. So, the word came out hoarse, loaded with hope and fear in equal measures. Sit. I indicated the chair even though he was already sitting, needing something to do with my hands that were trembling slightly. He obeyed in silence, those dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made it hard to maintain eye contact, but impossible to look away. The air between us was loaded with 8 years of history, of frustrated hopes, and lost chances and possibilities that were finally within reach. I spent 2 weeks thinking about you, about Samuel, about what I really want and need from my life. I kept my voice firm, even with my heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. And I chose. I saw the way he stopped breathing completely, how his fingers closed hard on the chair arms, how every muscle in his body tensed waiting for my next word. Who? You. I choose you, Levy. The words came out soft but firm, and seeing the way his face transformed, how relief and joy and something that looked a lot like tears appeared in his eyes, made my own heart expand in my chest. But there are conditions. He almost laughed, that sound that was half cry, half relief. Any conditions, all the conditions, whatever you want. No pulling back. Never again. If you get scared, if doubts come up, if something frightens you, you talk to me. You don't run, Don't disappear. Don't make excuses or lie to yourself. I kept my eyes fixed on his. You stay and face it even when it's hard. I promise. No pulling back. No running. His voice was thick with emotion. And no excuses. Oliver, you talk to him. Explain for real. Face whatever problems come from that like adults. Your dangerous world, we deal with it together. You don't push me away trying to protect me. You let me in and we face everything side by side. Together. Always together. He agreed immediately. I took a deep breath before saying the final part. The most important. And Levy, if you hurt me again, if you pull back or run or go back to being who you were, I'm not coming back. This is the last chance, the only one. You understand that? He leaned forward, taking my hands on the table with a firmness that contrasted with the vulnerability in his eyes. I understand, and I swear, by everything that matters, that I won't hurt you. Never again. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve this chance you're giving me. I love you, Levi Bianchi, for 8 endless years, through every disappointment and every frustrated hope, and every moment I tried to stop but couldn't. I always loved you, even when it hurt too much to admit. Tears were falling freely down his face now, and it was the first time I'd seen Levi cry, the first time I'd seen all that carefully constructed armor crumble completely. I love you too, always have, even when I was too much of a coward to admit it, and I'll love you for the rest of my life, Misty Berrycloth. That's a promise. Can I kiss you? Finally, without pulling back, without excuses, without fear. His voice came out almost as a whisper, loaded with an anticipation that echoed exactly what I was feeling. I laughed through the tears, feeling happiness expand in my chest in a way I hadn't felt in years. Yes, kiss me. And then he leaned over the table, one hand going to my face, as his lips met mine in a kiss that had 8 years of waiting compressed into every second. It wasn't gentle or soft, like the kisses with Samuel. It was intense, desperate, full of promises and regrets and love that had been stored for too long. It was everything I had imagined 1,000 times and even more. It was confirmation that yes, it was worth the wait, worth the risk, worth choosing the fire instead of the soft flame. When we finally separated, both breathing heavily and with tears still wetting our faces, the world around us slowly came back into existence. People in the cafe who had probably watched the whole scene, the sound of coffee machines and low conversations, reality returning after being suspended for those perfect moments. But none of that mattered, because finally, after 8 years of waiting and pain and almost destroyed hopes, Levi Bianchi was mine, and I was his, and everything that came after we would face together. Chapter 9. New Beginning.
Forever starts now.
6 months had passed since that kiss in the cafe that changed everything, and it was surprising how life could be completely transformed in so little time when you finally stopped fighting what your heart wanted and simply allowed yourself to live. The apartment Levi and I now shared was bigger than my old one, located in a quieter neighborhood of the city, with huge windows that let in abundant light during the day and offered a spectacular view of the urban lights at night. It hadn't been a difficult decision to move here when he suggested it after 3 months together, because waking up next to him every day, knowing I didn't have to wait until the next date to see him, having the absolute certainty that he wouldn't disappear or pull back, was worth any change. And Levi had kept every promise he made in that cafe, every single one. In the first months, I still waited for the pullback, for the excuse, for the moment when fear would return and he'd run like he always did. But that moment never came. When doubts or fears came up, and they did because real relationships aren't perfect, he talked to me, opened his mouth and said what he was feeling instead of disappearing into silence. When his work got too dangerous and my first instinct was to step back so I wouldn't get in the way, he pulled me closer and said we'd face it together. And when Oliver finally had that long and necessary conversation with the two of them, Levi didn't run from the hard questions or the uncomfortable truths my brother had every right to demand. Oliver had taken time to fully accept it, and I couldn't blame him for that. Seeing his younger sister with his best friend, especially after all the complicated history we had, wasn't exactly the ideal scenario he had imagined. But Levi had been patient, had proven through consistent actions that he was no longer the man who had repeatedly hurt his sister, and eventually Oliver had given in. Not with explosive enthusiasm, but with genuine acceptance that came with a very clear warning that if Levi screwed up this time, the 15-year friendship would be permanently over. Levi had agreed without hesitation because he understood that some things were worth any risk, and I was definitely one of them. Now, on a particularly clear Friday night, I was on the terrace of our apartment with a glass of wine in my hand, watching the stars that managed to shine through the city's light pollution. The air was fresh but not cold, perfect for being outside without needing a heavy coat. I heard the glass door slide behind me and felt his arms wrap around my waist before I even saw him, that familiar and comforting touch that had become my anchor in recent months. I leaned my head against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beating against my back. He kissed the top of my head softly and slowly, that small gesture he did at least 10 times a day, and that never failed to make me feel completely loved and safe. Happy? The question came in a whisper against my hair. I smiled, turning slightly to look at him. More than I ever imagined possible. And you? More than I ever imagined I deserved. He turned me completely in his arms, his dark eyes meeting mine with that intensity that hadn't diminished one bit since the beginning. Every day with you feels unreal, it's so good. I wake up and for a second I think I'm still dreaming, that you still haven't forgiven me, that I'm still alone paying for my mistakes. But you're not. You're here, with me, and this is real. I put my hand on his face, feeling the stubble scratch my palm slightly. Yeah, scarily happy. Like that happiness that seems too good to last, you know? I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for something to go wrong. He held my face with both hands, forcing me to look directly into his eyes. Nothing's going to go wrong. I won't let it. I fought too hard to have you. Almost lost you completely. I'm not letting anything ruin this now. I laughed at the absolutely serious and determined tone in his voice. Controlling. Always have been. He smiled, that rare and genuine smile that was reserved only for me. Then his expression became more serious, more vulnerable. Misty, thank you. For what? I frowned, genuinely confused about what he thought he needed to thank me for giving me this chance. After everything I did, all the times I hurt you, 8 years of being a complete idiot. His voice was thick with emotion. For choosing me even when Samuel was perfect, even when choosing him would have been easier and safer. For risking your heart with me again, when I definitely didn't deserve it. I felt tears burn my eyes, but they were good tears. The kind that came from being so happy your body didn't know how to process all that emotion. He was good, really good and kind, and everything any rational person would choose. I ran my fingers through his hair, that intimate gesture that had become second nature. But you're mine, always have been, since that first time I saw you when I was 12, and you were my brother's older and mysterious friend. I just needed you to realize it too, for you to stop fighting it and finally accept it. And I realized, late, painfully late, but I realized. He pulled me closer, until there was no space between our bodies. And now, I'm not letting go. Never again. You're stuck with me forever, no matter what happens. Good, because I'm not letting go either. I stood on my tiptoes, closing the distance between us. The kiss was soft at first, sweet and full of silent promises, but quickly deepened into something more intense, more necessary. Even after 6 months together, even after hundreds of kisses, each one still had the power to make my heart race and my entire body ignite. There was something about the way he kissed me, as if each time was simultaneously the first and the last, as if he was trying to tell me through touch everything words could never fully express. When we finally separated, both breathing faster, he rested his forehead against mine, and we stayed like that for a long moment, just existing together in the comfortable silence of the night. Eventually, we went back inside, the night's cold starting to penetrate through the light clothes I was wearing. Levy had put a movie on TV, some action thing he liked but that neither of us was really paying attention to. We were lying on the big living room couch, me tucked perfectly between him and the backrest, my head on his chest, and his fingers playing absent-mindedly with my hair, in a way that always left me sleepy and completely relaxed. Do you think we'll get married someday? The question came suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled. I raised my head to look at him, finding that curious and slightly vulnerable expression he had when asking questions about the future. Maybe, when we're ready, when it makes sense for both of us. No rush to follow a timeline society thinks we should follow. No rush, he repeated, thoughtful. Then, after a pause, but do you want to, eventually, even if it's years from now? I adjusted myself better, resting my chin on his chest so I could see him clearly while speaking. With you? Yes. I want everything. Marriage with that ridiculously expensive dress and flowers everywhere. Kids who'll have your eyes and probably your stubbornness. A whole life of silly arguments and reconciliations and growing old together until we're that annoying couple that still kisses in public at 70. I smiled seeing the expression on his face. But first, I just want this here. Us. Simple and real. Living together, learning each other, building this solid foundation before adding more complexity. Simple and real is perfect. He pulled me up, kissing my lips slowly and deeply. I love you, Misty, more than I thought it was possible to love someone. I love you too, I whispered against his lips before settling back on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart under my ear. Levy? His hand continued the gentle movement in my hair. Thank you. For finally staying. For fighting when it was hard. For not giving up even when I was pushing you away. For choosing me every day even when it's complicated. I felt the way he tensed for a second, emotion going through him before his voice came out, hoarse and thick. Thank you for letting me. For not giving up completely on me when you had every right to do so. For giving me a chance I definitely didn't deserve after everything I did. You deserve it. Now you deserve it. I adjusted to look at him again, because you proved it. Not with empty words or promises you didn't keep, but with consistent actions every day for 6 months. You changed, Levy, for real, and I'll keep proving it, every day, for the rest of my life, no matter how many years that is. His voice was firm, loaded with absolute determination. You'll never have reason to doubt me again. I smiled, feeling that deep and complete happiness fill me until it overflowed. I know, I trust you, completely. We stayed like that for hours, embraced on the couch while the movie neither of us was watching played in the background, and the city outside continued its nightly dance of lights and sounds. We didn't need anything more than this, beyond this simple and deep intimacy, beyond the certainty that we had each other, and that this time it was forever. Eventually, when the movie ended and the screen returned to the initial menu in an infinite loop, Levy carried me to the bedroom despite my protests that I could walk perfectly fine on my own. He just laughed and said he liked carrying me, that it made him feel useful and chivalrous, and I gave in because deep down, I loved when he did that. Lying in bed, wrapped in soft sheets and comforting darkness, he pulled me close once more, my body fitting perfectly against his, as if we had been made exactly for this. His hand found mine in the dark, fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become our silent way of saying I love you when words seemed insufficient. Forever, he whispered in the dark, so low I almost didn't hear. I squeezed his hand, turning my face to kiss whatever part of him I could reach in the dark, which ended up being his shoulder, forever. And as sleep came for me slowly, wrapped in arms that finally held me without fear of letting go, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. Not the easy choice or the safest one, but the right one. Because true love was never about ease or guarantees. It was always about finding that person who makes you want to be better, who challenges you and completes you, and makes you feel like you finally come home. And Levi Bianchi, with all his flaws and overcome fears and love that was too intense, was exactly that for me. My home, my forever, my happily ever after, that had taken 8 painful years, but that finally was real. We had a whole life ahead of us. Adventures and challenges, fights and reconciliations, eventual marriage and maybe kids, intense love that would burn through every day and every year, everything we had waited for so long, and it was worth every second, every tear, every disappointment, every moment of pain that brought us here. Because this right here, the two of us together finally without barriers or fears, was exactly where we always should have been. And now let's discover fun facts about this story. Levy had known Misty since she was 12. Totaling 12 years of knowing each other, but only 8 years since she fell in love with him at 16. Samuel was the one who sought out Levy at the bar for the conversation, not the other way around. He took the initiative to create a fair competition. Misty blocked Levy's number, but never blocked Samuel's, showing that the pain with Levy was much greater than any hurt with Samuel. The flowers Levy sent were white lilies, Misty's favorites mentioned casually only once years before, proving he always paid attention, even while pretending he didn't. From Chapter 1 to Chapter 9, only 9 months total passed. 3 months Misty with Samuel Sal plus, 2 weeks of decision, plus 6 months with Levy. The terrace appears in 3 key moments of the story. In the painful flashback at age 21, in Levy's grand confession at the birthday, and in the happy final moment with Levy. Levy kept his promise to give space for exactly 3 months, but watched Misty from afar without her knowing, respecting the boundary, but unable to give up completely. And if you want to see another incredible story, click on the video that appears now on your screen.